Hello, this is an interview with one of the previous Finder's Course class members, Paul Buxton. We're just going to go ahead and dive right in with the first question, which is, what changed for you over the course of the class and in the transition to persistent non-symbolic experience? You know, what were you like before? What was it like to experience life before? What were you like after or now, basically? What are you like now? What's it like now for you? So what would you say to that?
Prior to starting the course, I was quite severely depressed, probably bordering on suicidal, although I would never have committed suicide, but my general manner and feeling about life was pretty grim. Lots of problems with parents and illness and Alzheimer's in two patient parents. Business very difficult and very bad, and it just seems to have been for the past 5 or 8 years an uphill struggle every day, and constant recriminations about I could have done it better, I should have done this, I should have done that, what if I'd have done this, what if I'd have done that, on and on and on. My whole day seemed to be recriminations about what I'd done or hadn't done or should have done or could have done, and the rest of the time was then preoccupied with what if this happens, what happens tomorrow, what will this happen, what if we do this and do that and do the other, and then go down this road, go down that road, go down the other. Just a constant battle of worry and anxiety all the time. I had to think quite hard about that because all that's gone now, absolutely gone. The past really has absolutely no interest. The training and understanding with the course has led me to release so much anger and frustration and disappointment. All those have gone. The future, that's unwinding on a moment by moment basis now. I'm not interested in tomorrow or next week or the week after. So quite a different place from where I was just barely 6 months ago. The change for me is almost incomprehensible.
Wow, that's really amazing. What is your moment-to-moment experience like now?
Very difficult to describe. Obviously life goes around me as it always has done, and there are things that need to be done and people to visit and conversations to be had, but none of it's stressful anymore. It just seems to happen, and I still have some difficulties with some of the people around me, and the business still drags in a little bit, but I very quickly can release all that and become in the moment, and the moment is fine. Everything is absolutely perfect, and I've no desire to change anything or run off in this direction or that direction, because I feel quite comfortable, and things are as they are, and I'm being looked after, and I feel part of a huge whole, of which you're me and I'm you, and everything is. It's quite difficult to put words to.
If you had to list on a scale of 1 to 10 your well-being before the course and your well-being right now in this moment, what would that look like?
Minus something at the beginning, quite definitely. I can't imagine a better place than here and now at this moment, so it has to be a 10.
That's wonderful. I can just, you know, personally, obviously, it's been amazing to see this change in you. I was scared not to let you into the course when I was selecting people for the course, because I was just worried about what might happen. Although you've since said that, you know, you would have just probably thought, well, that's just another thing that didn't work out, and it wouldn't have been that big a deal necessarily. But boy, the transformation over the course, you know, I picked a couple of people, of course, for the course that were very unhappy, and a couple of people that were kind of average happy, and a couple of people that were super happy. And so you took one of those slots that were on the very unhappy side. And I think it was pretty easy for me to guess what would happen to the average happy person. But I didn't know really what the impact would be for the super happy people. And I didn't really know what the impact would be for people who were, you know, really, really down, who were really at the toughest, really self-described as the toughest place in their life, which is very much how you put it. So yeah, that transformation I think has just been absolutely phenomenal. Let me ask, was that transformation gradual for you, or was it an immediate sort of shift that occurred, or was there a graduation and then sort of an immediate shift to a different level of it, or what did that really show up like for you?
I can't really describe it. It was very much a gradual process, I think, because I can't actually put my finger on a particular moment during the course. There's just a general feeling of well-being. My expectations were pretty low to start off with anyway, so any progress would have been out of sight. With the way the training went and the way that I kind of unlearned all the conditioning and things that have gone on, that gave me a much better outlook on life almost, and I seem to get back to where I'd been about 10 years ago. But this seemed to progress even further and deeper, and once I started getting introduced to some of the new ideas, which I'd not really had any reading about, the various sorts of meditation and what have you, and non-dual and all this, everything was new, even though I'd studied most religions superficially over the past 18 years. So I can't actually say when it happened. I know it went through a little bit of a sad period where I think everything just got too much, and there was too much input at one stage for me. But you very quickly helped me to ground back and find a level on that. And I'm sure it was after that period when I kind of pedaled backwards, if you like, a little, that things became more real and started dropping in place correctly. And as I say, I can't tell you when it happened. I feel as though I've been like this forever, but obviously not.
Has it been a result of just everything improving, and, you know, has the business gotten better and all the family stuff gotten better? Is it circumstances that have been a result of this?
Not at all. I would say that things are pretty well where they were when we started, if not in some cases, particularly with business, even more difficult and stressful. But they're not stressful anymore. The difficulties that are there, I will deal with as and when they're placed in front of me. And I'll have the words and the means to do what needs to be done on a moment-by-moment basis. Obviously, I have to make some plans with the parents and what have you to make sure that I turn up on time to take them shopping or to appointments and all the rest of it. But that's no different than before, and I'm probably even better now. I use the old electronic devices to remind me a day and an hour or so before virtually everything. I'm not sure whether that's an age thing or a location situation. I can't quite make my mind up. But basically my parents are still quite poorly. There's quite a lot of stress around my mother and my father-in-law, who both got Alzheimer's. My father at the moment is actually quite well. And business is as difficult as it possibly could be, but who knows? There are plans and processes in place which I'm certainly not going to dwell on the outcome of those. I've done all I can, and the powers that be will ensure a result or not. But it's fine. It's absolutely fine. Before, I'd have been tearing my hair out, I'd have been sleepless, I'd have been pacing up and down, what if, it would have done this, it would have done. No.
So is there a tremendous acceptance? You know, if you're not analyzing stuff in the past, I'm curious, you know, does that show up as an acceptance? Or how do you feel that?
I know it's difficult for people around me because the person that I knew as Paul really isn't quite there in the same way. Okay, I'm still a dad and a husband and a colleague and all the rest of it. But what's gone in the past has obviously helped me be the person I am and the knowledge and the understanding I've got. But I don't dwell on it. I really have lost attachment to pretty well everything, much to the distress of my wife. You know, I mean, I'd be quite happy to clear everything into a bin and I wouldn't miss it, which is quite hurtful for my wife, who's somewhat of a squirrel with mementos and what have you. So there's a little bit of toing and froing on that front at the moment. But for me, it's okay. It really is okay.
I think that's actually a really good point to bring up. Many people worry, I think, what will happen to them if they were successful in making a transition to a persistent non-symbolic experience. You know, would they just, especially if they're in a whole series of difficult situations like that, you know, would they basically just wash their hands of it and walk away, you know, or would they, you know, remain engaged with it and really work through it? And I mean, certainly talking to you, it's my standard experience, so it's not a surprise to me. But I think it's good for people to actually hear a firsthand account of it. I mean, you're still right there in the thick of it, dealing with everything as best you can, right as it comes up.
I think that's the whole point, is that the situation hasn't changed, but the way I view it and the way I'm dealing with it has changed. My emotions are quite flat in comparison to what they might have been before, which some people might find a bit strange. Never been terribly over demonstrative all through my life, so the change is not that much. But I'm so much more, well, so much calmer now amongst my friends and relatives and what have you. It's a huge improvement on where I was 6 months ago. So whatever the improvement at the moment, it's got to be a plus for the other people. So, but nothing's changed. But the way I deal with things, I'm not quite as passionate and I'm not quite as emotional and I'm not quite as involved. It still gets more than 100% of my attention and my conditioning, I think, if you like. I've been a caring person all my life, so I can't see that would ever go PNSE or not, because I don't think you can scratch that bit out. You know, it's like breathing, it's like driving your car. I mean, those are so ingrained in us that I think to stop caring altogether would be meaningless. That just wouldn't come into the agenda at all, I don't think. But it's not anything I'm thinking about because it is what it is at this moment, and whatever comes up is what should be there and what needs to be looked at and dealt with on that particular point in time.
Do you feel more effective or less effective or the same amount of effectiveness as you were before dealing with these things?
Possibly because of my low esteem, I've never really given myself credit for anything. But now I can say the things that I do and the knowledge I have and the decisions I make are generally good decisions, and not blowing my own trumpet, but I really should have been patting myself on the back perhaps a few years ago, whoever that person was. But I don't care anymore whether anybody listens to me or not. But yes, I would say I'm probably more effective because I haven't got the worry and the stress and the anxiety of the outcome. I can look at things quite dispassionately almost, and make, I hate to use the word judgment, but judgments do come into decisions, and I think my judgment throughout my life has generally been good. It's just not always been listened to, and I'm sure that will continue to be the case in the future. All I can do is give it my best as it turns up.
Some people that I've talked to recently, as I've been giving the occasional lecture and stuff about the research and where the Finders class, where the Finders course turned up and all of that. Some people have had interesting reactions to it, and there's a few things that I'd be curious to get your feedback or your experience on. One thing is that there's a sense of, especially because you're so in the thick of all of these very intense life situations right now, there's a sense among people, I think, that, and it's kind of a funny way of saying it, but they're basically afraid to lose their fear. They're afraid of what might happen when they reach sort of the level of equanimity that you're talking about. They're afraid that, you know, it's their fear and their discontentment and, you know, all of those things, their unhappiness or whatever, their negative emotions, that really are a key driver of their motivation in the world. And they're very much afraid, like, well, maybe I wouldn't do anything. Maybe I would just like sit around all day and do nothing, or maybe I wouldn't achieve or accomplish as much as I might otherwise as a result of this fear. I wonder, you know, I wonder what you would say to them about this and what your perspective around that is.
Who wants fear? I seem to have lived that for the past 60 years of my, well, not 60, but certainly a majority of my life has been quite fearful. One of my goals was to be less fearful, right from the word go. That was quite high on the list, although BNF was kind of about fourth or fifth, so it's the only way I could remember things. I would say I'm fearless. I've never not confronted a fear all throughout my life, but I have worried about it, and I have been concerned about it, and I've been anxious about it. And when I've been stood in front of it, I've always come up on top. So get the fear, confront the fears, and let them go, because there is nothing to fear.
Did you feel during those periods of your life in a similar sort of way that fear, or that these sort of more negative aspects of experience were in some way an important driver to make your business work, or, you know, anything like that? Did you ever have an experience of that, or were you always very different? Was it always sort of something that was just to be confronted and overcome? And, although those aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, really.
I think most of the past 18 years with business, because of my business partner, have really been management by crisis. We've virtually skipped from one sort of semi-disaster to another, or it felt that way. I need to go back and think very hard, because the memory's now gone, and all the sort of bad feelings about those episodes, I have no feeling one way or the other. They've gone. They really have gone. So fear, I've been very good comforter for other people who've been fearful, and I've been quite a strong character all my life. Looking back, perhaps I'm not particularly a good business person. I'm more of a people person, and that's something that maybe some of the regrets and some of the worries and anxieties that were around me was that unfulfilled situation in my life from previous. Doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter.
Do you feel less motivated? I mean, do you feel like there's a reduced motivation on your part, or that you're, you know, do you have that sense of like, you know, yeah, I'm just basically gonna go sit on a couch and stare at the wall for a while? You know, there's, I mean, people, I think, I mean, it sounds silly to say, but people have that kind of fear around this level of well-being and emotional sort of stability. And
I think what I've got now is time. I've never had time. I've got so much time now that if I need to stare at a wall for a few hours, I've got the time to do it. I never did have the time to do it. I wouldn't stare at a wall anyway. I tend to stare out at the garden. Then I realise the hedge needs cutting or the weed needs picking up, whatever. That hasn't gone. Whether that's conditioning or not, I like my garden. I get a lot of pleasure out of it. There's a lot of flowers and plants there and the birds, and I find that's quite a nice connection. And I've now got time to enjoy it. And that is a very big thing for me. I'm not spending my time worrying about this or planning that or planning something else. I'm taking on board all the good things I have, which I've never really appreciated, and taking them on board. And the wall's actually not unattractive in its own right. It's a particular sort of brick, and the craftsmanship's quite nice, and there's lots one could contemplate about a wall, and I certainly wouldn't say that that was no value, but I still go shopping, and I still go looking after the parents, I still do the gardening. I've no great ambitions. I'm 62. I'll probably achieve more in my life than I ever expected to when I started out anyway. And I think for the past 10 years or so, I've been worried about hanging on to it all. That's not a fear anymore, because I know that wherever I am, I will be fine.
The other thing that I've been hearing a lot from people lately is, when we talk about, when you say, the Paul is not quite, the same Paul is not quite there anymore. And when I talk about a transition from sort of a narrative-based, individualized sense of self, to a different way of experiencing the world, to a different sense of self, really, to quite a different sense of self and sense of being in the world and how the world shows up. Some people are very, very scared of that. Their view is, maybe they're just already super happy, and they think to themselves, well, I've worked very hard to get this happy, and I don't want necessarily a radical shift in that. And I've talked about that in some of the interviews that I've done already with some of your fellow classmates that already started off very happy, and the difference there. But I think there's also a sense that, that narrative self, that individualized sense of self, it really wants control. It's been for its whole life trying to get more and more and more control, trying to get more and more and more. It's worked on itself, it's developed itself, and it's the one that's basically hearing that there's this transition. It's going through that filter. It's going through that sort of narrative self, individualized sense of self type filter. And it's, I think, rightly kind of a terrifying thing for that part of ourselves to hear. I wonder what you would say to people who are fearful of that, or who are concerned about what they'll be like afterward, or what happens to them, quote unquote, that type of thing.
I think I've been searching all my life for something, for this in fact, although I never quite knew what it was. I came from a spiritualist background, so there was always spirit and clairvoyance and clairaudience around me from a very early age. I was always very interested in physical healing, and so I had quite a firm idea about what was going on. I thought. My truth is quite different now. If anybody ever asked me to sum up what life was about, I always used to say it was about love, unconditional love. At some level, I've always believed that we are all one entity. Deep down, I've always believed that, but never really kind of managed to touch it. I've always been separate from that. And I think most of my life I've been searching, and I've been quite distressed and quite unhappy at times in my life, because I feel as though I just can't quite reach whatever it was that I think I should be a bigger part of. Although part of me understood that I was at the heart of that, whatever, but I was separate. And it's this separateness that has gone. I don't feel separate anymore. I really do understand, and my own understanding of it, that you and I are the same person. And our experience is just slightly different, but it's all part of the same experience. So to anybody who's fearful about this, what a revelation to be totally at one with oneself, and to be able to accept part of you is out there killing and raping and plundering and chopping the forest down, and there's another part running around trying to save it and put it right. All of that is me, and I can't explain it. I really can't. But whatever I've been searching for all my life seems to be here and now.
How do you handle that sort of seeming cognitive dissonance in a way between part of you running around cutting down forests and other part of you trying to save it? I'm sure that most people that hear that must think to themselves, well, how in the world would I deal with that?
Well, it's something I've thought about for a long time, certainly when I've been doing my teachings and what have you, and trying to describe what the human condition is and what our souls are, and you know, trying to get some explanation for it all. But all the separation is all about being separate, and that's not what it's about. We are everything: the good, the bad, the indifferent, the sublime. And I think the realization, I mean, I'm not in an airy-fairy palace place by any means, but my understanding of it is so deep and comfortable, and I haven't got a problem, because this is a physical world that we're living in, but you look at it small enough and it's just this load of spaces between atoms. And who am I? Who are you? You know, these are questions that you made us confront during the course, and there were some very interesting answers out of it. We're the same.
What about synchronicity and changes, and any change in sort of the experience of synchronicity in your life? Or flow, or I don't know how to, other words we could use for it.
I can't say that I've noticed anything specific at all, because everything is as it should be. So I can't say that I'm looking for synchronicity, and whatever seems to come seems to be the right thing, whether it's difficult or easy, or whether it's a happy experience or maybe a sad experience. None of it really. It doesn't matter. It's what it is, and each has its own pluses and minuses, which balance out. But synchronicity, not for me, no, because I've never been a very sort of desiring sort of person anyway. I think I only ever desired one thing, and that was a car, and it got robbed off of me about 10 days after, and I think that taught me not to covet things, and so I enjoy the things I have, and I stopped coveting a long time ago. The future, as I say, the future is wherever it is, and it's not important. So, but things seem easier. But I don't know whether that's just because of my perception of it, and the fact that I'm not worrying about the what ifs and what was and why it and all the rest of it. All that's gone. So there isn't the same worries and drives and concerns anymore.
I think another way to look at synchronicity, when I think about the specific part of the persistent non-symbolic experience continuum that you're in, I often think of it as, in some sense, each moment sort of being a synchronicity. You know, synchronicities are often thought of as sort of meaningful coincidences or something like that. That's a typical definition of them. But they're the kind of thing that you know it when you see it. You know, there's sort of these. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to goals or what someone wants, or manifestation or anything like that. It can very much just be sort of an amazing way that that sort of life and moments and experience just seems to be unfolding. And when I often think that the descriptions from the place on the continuum that you're talking from is in some sense that kind of every moment is an experience of synchronicity.
I think that's what I'm trying to say, really, is the things just are working out as they should do, because I'm here now at this moment and nothing else exists for me at the moment. It is just now the conversation we're having, and I hope it's helpful for other people as well, because I'm listening to my words and I'm quite surprised at what comes out of my mouth as well. That's I've always been able to talk fairly well off the cuff, but I'm not even given this state of being a huge amount of time anymore, because it just is what it is, and I don't want to analyse it. I think one of our last conversations was that I don't feel I have to justify what I am or why I am or what I'm experiencing. I certainly have no desire to sort of jump up on a bandwagon and sort of say, hey, come and follow this, because this is right for me, it's necessarily right for you. I think the awakening process is absolutely essential for every human being, at whatever level of the continuum that they alight on. I'm quite surprised to find myself here, but maybe not looking back. It's probably just perfect for me at the moment. But it's such an exciting ride to get here. I'm sort of surprised to find that I had arrived possibly a few hours or days or weeks before I actually realised I had got there. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, and that definitely happens. I hear that from quite a few people. It's almost, it's kind of interesting in the sense that in neuroscience there's all sorts of evidence now of things happening, a decision being made, for instance, but then us not becoming aware of them maybe for another period of seconds or sometimes even minutes, sometimes just fractions of a second. And so in that sense, with those types of findings, it's not surprising, I think, at all, that one can in fact have this very significant shift, but not necessarily realize it right away, especially if it's a gradual transition into it rather than just an instantaneous experience. I mean, we all have that experience where we know someone and they've changed a little bit over time and we don't see the change, and then somebody comes in that hasn't seen them, or during all those gradual changes, and they're like, oh my God, you're completely different than the last time I saw you. And we're just kind of looking at them like, I don't know, that don't seem completely different to me.
I must say that the job I do, I meet a lot of people who come in regularly, but not necessarily every week. It might be once or twice a year. And I've lost you.
No, I'm still here.
Sorry. Several people that have come in recently to see me have noticed a major change in the way I am and the way the way I look. I seem to be very red tonight. I don't quite know why. It's quite hot and stuffy over here, but generally I feel very much more peaceful. My job's always, time's gone sideways. At 10 o'clock it's about 10:15, 3 hours later, but now all that's gone. Time, I've got more time now, and it's useful time. It's time that I can be contemplative with, I can communicate with people or not, as the case may be. And for me, the release of the chitter-chatter of the brain, when I'm the sort of guy that up until this change, I'd look up at an aeroplane going overboard and wonder where they were coming from, back from holiday and going to holiday, whether they had a good time, whether somebody was going to pick them up at there, and whether the children had been. And I had a whole history and story going on about the aeroplane. That was just one plane going overhead. I look at a plane now and it's a plane. I don't need to discuss the story anymore, and that goes for pretty well everything I come across now. Certainly, some things I find quite interesting. I've still got hobbies and what have you, and I still like reading. I still like all the things that I did before. I stopped watching television though. really stopped watching television. I now look at the thing and say I'd like to watch that particular program, and if I miss it, it doesn't matter. But I used to be a bit of a couch potato with the TV. That has gone. That's definitely gone.
What, if you were to think back, what do you think was the most powerful or most important moments of the course for you?
There were so many. I can't put my finger on one thing, because it was like you'd given us a huge toy box, and every week something new came out to play with it. It was quite. I'm going to get about as excited as I can do at the moment, but it was good fun. I've not enjoyed myself like this for so many years that I can't remember. There were some wonderful people that we met, some that I couldn't quite understand, others that I took to very much to heart. There's procedures and practices and videos to watch. The whole thing was pretty engaging for me, and there was just so much, and it was fabulous. I can't say that any one particular thing, although obviously there's a couple of practices that have resonated with me. I really enjoyed listening to Dr. Bob and his attitudes and what have you. I particularly like the Headless Way, and I constantly find myself coming to that, because this capacity for everything, and I always enjoy driving, but I enjoy driving even more now as the scenery comes and flows past me. It's quite wonderful. So those two particular things, and I also like the Jeffrey Thompson music as well, and I've recently just purchased a little bit more of his stuff, which I find it's an hour every day which I will spend with one or two of his different meditation things. And I just wish I got good hearing in both ears, because I'm deaf in my right ear, so I don't quite get the stereo separation that I should do. But those are just a few things, but it was the overall camaraderie of the whole group, and the six of us that took the course became very close, and I think we're good friends now. And I think sharing our own experiences and supporting each other was very important. That was as important as meeting Stephanie and Dr. Bob and Sperry, and all people that will be forever in my heart and in my mind. In fact, I communicate with quite a few of them on their Facebook and emails and what have you. So it's all good stuff. But I can't say that you produced anything, one particular thing that was better than anything else. Well, not for me anyway.
I think that's fair. It's a very, very carefully constructed cocktail, that's for sure. I think people probably hear on these interviews, everybody saying, well, I continue on with this practice, I continue on with that practice, and they're probably wondering to themselves, oh, well, wait a minute, how real are these shifts that these people are experiencing? I mean, is this a permanent thing? Or do these people feel like they've got to keep, doing all of this stuff? Or are they, are they still seekers? Are they still like looking for something? Is that why they're doing this stuff? Or, what would you say to that type of question?
Right. Before I started the course, I was always a busy person, but I had no time for me. Very rarely would I ever do anything just for me. So suddenly I found I have to do a practice that involves prayers, forgiveness. What's forgiveness about? All sorts of little exercises, goals. I've not written a goal down for 100 years. So there's lots of new things for me, which before I knew it, I found time every morning and every evening for the morning and evening practice. I put aside a full hour for meditation or more if I could find it. And I was absolutely blown away at the ability to find 2 hours a day. with no problem at all, and they were enjoyable 2 hours. As anybody who goes through the course, I'm sure the thing will be of a similar format, and you'll lead people from a very slow beginning all the way through. And before I knew it, I was taking on board all sorts of practices and different things from one week to the next, and some were more resonating than others, some were very difficult, and sitting there the first few weeks meditating, that hour was a long hour sometimes. Now, what hour? I can't be an hour already. That's ridiculous. So I think you need to make the commitment, but it wasn't difficult for me. When I got on the course, I thought, wow, I really didn't expect this. It was that was the first thing. And I'm probably the sort of person that if I'm given a task, I will complete that task come hell or high water, and I will get results of some description, good, bad, or indifferent. So, if I do anything, I will do it to the best of my ability. So I kind of threw myself into it. But it wasn't hard. It wasn't an effort. It wasn't something that I thought, oh, I've got to do an hour of meditation today. I mean, when am I going to do that? That never happened at all. I managed to find an hour before I went to work, or, I found that half an hour before I went to sleep at night for the prayers and the affirmation. It wasn't difficult. It really was. It was enjoyable. I think that was the best part of it. And then feeling differently about things and realizing that there were changes going on, and I was feeling calmer and more content, and I had no idea where it was going to lead. I was quite happy if I'd have been kicked off the course after the first 3 weeks with what I'd learned, because my well-being had increased considerably over quite a short period of time.
So if you've experienced this, I think another way of approaching this is if you've experienced this profound shift, do you feel like you still have to keep doing various practices, or, why is it that you still are keeping with things?
That's a very good question. I can't answer it. I can't answer it. I enjoy it. I enjoy as much as I enjoy anything. I enjoy that morning, half an hour for thinking about people I know and reviewing goals and sending the prayers. Beginner's a bit difficult because I don't think I've got anything left to forgive anymore. So that's something. Being grateful as well. That's something I tend to have a look around and appreciate more what is around me. The music meditation, I think I'd far rather spend an hour meditating and just winding out from the material world. I think that's probably the best part about the meditation. I would miss it if I didn't do it. I can't say anymore. It's enjoyable, and it's time for me, and I seem to go deeper and seem to have more synchronicity. Well, not synchronicity. I seem to have more beingness and awareness of all it is.
So more of an exploring, really, than a. It's not like there's a necessity or like, oh my God, I've got to do this kind of thing.
No, not at all. I've never felt that from the word go. I've never felt that, oh, I've got to do this. Sometimes in the early days when I wasn't quite disciplined, it was a bit difficult to find an hour. I'd be kind of running out of time during the day to try and find an hour to sit down. But I just changed my attitude to the whole thing, and this was more important than anything else that could have been around at the time. Because I could see the benefits, and I think you kept giving us tests every now and again on our well-beings and what have you, which I studiously filled in, our life stories, which went from a small novel to barely a paragraph. Fascinating. part of me wants to analyze it, but the main part of me is quite content to know that it's happened and I'm here now.
How important do you think commitment was, like a degree of commitment to the course? For people who are going through it, to what degree do you think the level of their commitment is important?
I think if you're going to start this, you need to finish it. You need to give it 100% because you're not sure where it's going to take you. And I've dealt with people all my life, and I'm a pretty fair judge of character and of means and methods and what have you. And I think the most important part about the whole course was it wasn't threatening in any way, and it was tremendously supportive. If there was a problem, you were always on hand, or there was another member of the group I could sort of have a chat with on the side before we discussed it with anybody else. I think commitment is important. I think it has the potential to make such a wonderful impact on your life that to not give it 100%, why bother at all? Sorry for that. That's how I feel.
Well put.
People go on these retreats and all this sort of stuff. I mean, that requires commitment, and I just hope that you're able to engage with the people that perhaps haven't been on these spiritual trips and aren't sort of actively seeking, I don't know, these, how to make your life wonderful in 10 easy stages and all this sort of thing. I hope that people that come to this come to genuinely want to experience a change in their well-being and to become awakened.
Is there anything that, do you think that are there any downsides that you've experienced, or is there anything that people should fear about this experience?
It was pretty intense, this. I think at one stage I'd gone really quite happy and comfortable, and I was quite pleased, and then suddenly things seemed to change a little bit. I wasn't quite sure what was going on, and troubled me a little bit because I thought, hang on, I seem to be slipping back a bit here. What's happening? What's going on? Why all of a sudden are things not continuing to go in a positive way, if you like? Well, it wasn't a negative way, it was different. Things were not quite as sparkly as they perhaps should be. But as you know, I contacted one of the people first, and she said, "Oh, get in touch with Jeffrey. I'm sure he'll have a chat with you." And we had a chat, and I think I just overloaded, really. I think I'd gone from such a miserable place to such a good place that it was all a little bit too much, and whoever Paul was didn't like it very much, and was kicking off. So we scaled back on things, and some of the practices weren't as intense. And I think after that, and coming back up to where I was before, sometime after that was when the shift happened, I'm sure. So, yeah, be aware that the help and the support and the mentoring is behind the course. There's nobody throwing you out without a life raft or without a ring in case you start struggling a bit. So, fear, no. Be aware that things do change during the course, but overall it's just sort of, like I said, -10 to +10 for me, and whatever little bit of a hiccup in the middle of it was dealt with over a matter of about 2 weeks, I think it was. I think we had a chat once, twice, 3 times, I think, maybe. All of which was fantastic. I mean, you pull your car over on the side of a freeway to have a chat with me in the middle of the day, because I'm in the UK, and obviously there is a time difference of several hours. I think we're about 8 hours today. But I think knowing that the support's there, you give the commitment, you'll get the commitment back from Jeffrey or whoever's leading your particular aspect of the course.
What about in a broader sense? In terms of PNSE, Do you think that there's anything to are there any downsides that you see to it? Is there any reason to fear the transition to PNSE and what it brings itself?
How could there be? How could there be? To experience this is what I've been looking for most of my life. And if you're looking or you're a seeker and you're fortunate to find it, I can't see a downside. I really can't. I can understand why people might be concerned about changes in personality and what have you. And depending on your relationships with your partner, I've been with my wife since 75, so we're looking on nearly 40 years together. Not been married that long, but not far off. I can't imagine life without Anita, irrespective of how I feel now. I know she can't hear me at the moment. The way I love her is different. The passionate love isn't there anymore, but we still have a good relationship. We still argue and naggy, and she knows which buttons to press to get me wound up, and some of that conditioning, well, it's definitely falling away. I mean, it's certainly not as difficult as it was even a few months ago. And I will stick with Anita. I have no desire to move on and go philandering or anything. That isn't in my nature. It wasn't before, and I can't see why it would change now. So the essence of me, most people probably wouldn't notice a huge difference apart from the fact I'm a little bit happier, I'm more content, I'm not sort of tearing my hair out or worrying or appearing to worry. If anything, I'm probably more stable and more easy to deal with, because people didn't like me before. I was really a miserable so-and-so to be near. But again, I'm not exactly talkative either. I don't particularly want to go into long conversations with people. I'm not really interested in, you know, what happened to their little Jimmy and her mother and his mother and go and the woman with the purple hair next door but two said to me. I never have been interested in gossip, but I do find now that there's a lot less interest in gossip. But that's not to say I can't have a good conversation. Certainly with people I enjoy being with, and I probably got more out of me tonight than I've spoken for the past couple of weeks, probably.
That definitely happens. It definitely happens. Especially, you know, this shows up differently at different locations on the continuum. And there are definitely places where you just, you can see if this resonates with you, but there's just such a lessening of interest in, you know, people's stories and the stories that they want to tell and the sort of image that they want to project, and all of that stuff. That it's not that you don't enjoy people. You can definitely still very much enjoy people and very much enjoy spending time with people and all of that. But a lot of, you know, so much of our lives in sort of just normal humanness have to this point been built around stories and the exchange of stories and giving other people approval for their stories or sympathy for their stories or whatever else. And certainly, especially the deeper one goes into the continuum, that falls away. And an interest in that falls away in very significant ways.
Okay. I mean, I can quite glibly say I don't care, and I mean it in the nicest possible way. But I really don't care that you've had a bad day or that tomorrow might be worse day. I really haven't got that engagement anymore. Now, if somebody's crying or they've hurt themselves or whatever, then I'm probably the first to go and pick them up and put an arm around them and mop them up. But I'm not looking to find out, you know, what they were running from that caused them to trip up in the first place. how they got there is immaterial.
Right, and I think that's a very important point to bring out about it. It's not that a rejection of story means a rejection of caring, or a rejection of caring for a person who's in a tough spot or is whatever. But the story behind it doesn't have its importance. But yet you're still there for the person that needs it.
I would say that's very true. And the stories aren't as important. My story is not important anymore. I don't feel I have to justify myself or be anything particular to be whatever. I still will be Paul to most of the people that come and meet me, and they will perhaps notice a smaller well-being and a more contented Paul than they met for some time. Possibly distant as well, because I don't engage as much as I used to, unless I'm interested in whatever it is that they want to engage in. So that can possibly rub off badly on some people, but I'm aware of who I can cheese off and who I don't. So I tend to, why make waves?
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else that you can think to chat about? Anything that comes to mind?
Just so thankful for the opportunity to have arrived at this spot, and I certainly wouldn't have done it without the Founders Course. That's quite apparent. As I say, I've been looking for this, and I've had a few glimpses. I've had a few transcendental explosions of connectedness and oneness, but they've never lasted. It's something I kind of always wanted to go back to recapture or whatever, but not anymore. Not anymore.
That's awesome. And I would say, of course, thank you, because the best protocol in the world doesn't mean anything if people don't come to it and sincerely give it a try. And so it's very, especially from where you were, that was a big thing to do. So
it was a lifeline that I needed at the time, and I would have given it 100% commitment, irrespective of the way I was at the beginning, because that's who I am. But I think the commitment, why bother if you're not going to see it through? Is how I feel about it. Something like this, it requires a fair amount of work, but I use the word work very loosely, because it wasn't work. It was enjoyment. It's a way of life, and so yeah, commitment definitely. But it's something that you'll enjoy doing if you follow the things. Get over the first couple of hours of meditations and the difficulties there if you're not a meditator, and so plain sailing the rest of the way.
all right, sir. Thank you very much. I will talk to you again soon. Thank you very, very much for making time to help out and to help people.
My pleasure, Jeffrey. My pleasure.
Have a great evening.